don't have sound here, but we're gonna slate verbally. This is Amanda, take one. I guess that's all we need to say. So,
Amanda,
Play.
and remember one thing, we're not gonna ever hear my voice. So if I say, what happened to you when you bought new shoes, you have to say, when I bought new shoes.
Right.
Not my mind.
Got it.
When we were talking on the phone the other day, you told me the story, you said, here's what happened. I was running and this would happen to me and now I have the bones of an idiot. Can you just tell us very briefly your basic story?
Yeah, I got into running not out of wanting to be a runner, but because it was free and it required no subjectivity, meaning that if you could run a time on a track, you can run that time on a track is equivalent everywhere in the world. So you didn't need fancy coaches, you didn't need fancy equipment, and so I chose it because of those reasons. And where I was living, where I grew up, there was no, I'm Canadian in general.
pause for a second. Go fix that. Just the right side where it's sticking out. This is very good. Now I'm not.
We're gonna start again a little bit. You're trying a little bit too much.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what you're getting to.
So what we wanna say is, I was a long distance runner in college at 18, and what happened was, I didn't know.
Yeah,
this,
literally that.
But I trained at this, I trained, I lost my period, I had no idea this would happen, and then what happened is this, and then, because what I'm really trying to say to you is, I'm gonna try another question. Alright, ready?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Rolling? What's the running triad problem?
Yeah, the female triad or female athlete triad syndrome was the first term. I had never heard it before until I was in college, and but very rarely. And what it is it's defined as a loss of three things, and it's amenorrhea, which means the loss of menstruation or your period, anorexia, meaning you're underweight, and overtraining syndrome, and it's basically an energy deficit. But that's a very simplification of what I believe it really is, and they've stemmed now to what they call Red S or REDS, which involves so much more, because it wasn't even considered a disease. And when I was running, I think I heard the term maybe once or twice, maybe in passing, but when I lost my period, that was like normal. Like like doctors were like, "Oh yeah, but you're a distance runner, so you should lose your period." Like it was almost like if I got my period, I was scared to get it because that meant that I was no longer fit and no longer lean enough or thin enough. And I also struggled with severe anemia. I had multiple blood transfusions with iron levels of a hemoglobin of a dying cancer patient. Which is another symptom. I had osteopenia, which stemmed into osteoporosis at a very, in my like at the age of 21, which is rare. But again, these are not problems that at the time I thought no big deal. And actually, everyone kind of enforced that was like, I think it was a lack of education at the time that, someone would get worried that was on the outside of the sport and say, you need to see a doctor. Like, this is not normal. These labs are not normal. Or you're breaking all these bones. Like, what's going on? And then you'd see a sports specialist and they go, oh no, but you're an endurance athlete. Of course, of course you're amenorrheic. Of course you have severe anemia. Of course you're like iron deficient. All of these things. That comes with. It was almost like a stamp of like, I'm legitimately at this level.
All right. We're gonna do something else, Krista. I need you to get some lines that James asked me to get. So I'm gonna do that first. So that's a little more boring.
Thank you.
And then we'll have to talk later.
Sure.
So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna say a line. You have to wait till I stop so my sound doesn't overlap yours.
Okay, cool.
And then you just say the line.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you the line, and then you say the line. I'm gonna tell you the line, and then you say the line.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Because I just gotta keep. I promise I'm gonna get there. Yeah, just make one long tail. Tell me you're ready.
Ready?
There's a crisis in women's sports.
There is a crisis in women's sports.
It starts when athletes believe that run fast. It starts when athletes believe that to run fast, they have to run thin.
It starts when athletes believe that in order to run fast, you have to run thin.
There's a long-held belief in the running community that to run fast, you need to run thin.
There's a long-held belief in the running community that in order to run fast, you have to run thin.
Female athletes who overtrain and underfuel are at great risk.
Female athletes that overtrain and underfuel are at a very great risk.
This cycle can have devastating effects on the female body.
This cycle has devastating effects on the female body.
Say it again, this cycle has devastating effects on the female body.
This cycle has devastating effects on the female body.
Every athlete in any sport who competes at a high level is at risk.
And every athlete that competes at a high level in sports is at risk.
Say it a little more conversation. Every athlete in any sport who competes
Okay.
at a high level is at risk.
Every athlete who competes in sports is at high risk.
Every athlete in any sport who competes at a high level is at risk.
Okay. Every athlete, regardless of the sport, that competes at a very high level is at a risk.
However, female long distance runners are at the greatest risk of all.
However, female distance runners are at the greatest risk of all.
Their training practice often results in a cycle of disordered eating, physical injury, and mental health problems.
Their cycle often results in disordered eating patterns, energy deficit, and long-term consequences.
This training practice often results in a cycle of disordered eating, physical injury, and mental uncertainty, or mental health.
Disordered eating, physical injury, and mental health. This cycle often results in physical injury, disordered eating, and mental health issues.
The cycle begins when the female athlete misses her period.
And the cycle begins when the female athlete misses her period.
All right, one more time.
I would actually argue that's not when it begins, but that's,
Okay, I'm just reading what you wrote.
I mean, that's when it's gotten to a point of like very bad, yeah.
So say
The cycle begins before that female athlete first loses her period. Like,
Okay, when does the cycle begin?
the cycle begins as soon as there's an energy deficit, as soon as she's
And why don't you say the cycle begins when there's an energy deficit but reaches a crisis point or whatever.
which reaches
critical
a crisis and reaches a critical
point when she misses her period.
The cycle begins when there's an energy deficit, and it becomes critical when she loses her period.
This sets off a chain reaction that results in long-term damage to her mind and body.
This results in a chain reaction that results in long-term damage to both her mind and her body.
This sets off a chain reaction that results in long-term. You said results in long-term. This sets off a chain reaction that results in long-term damage to both her mind and body.
This sets off a long-term reaction that results in, oh my God, start that again. This results in long-term harm. Sorry, what was that? This results in long-term harm.
Long-term damage to both her mind and body.
Okay.
And you gotta put a little emotion in this, because this is serious now.
This results in long-term damage that affects both her mind and her body.
This cycle is commonly known as the female athlete triad.
This cycle is most commonly known as female athlete triad, or Red S.
Now, with proper education and better understanding the problem, we can prevent this condition.
Now, with awareness of the problem and education of the risk, we can better what?
This condition is preventable.
Now, with education of the problem and awareness, this problem is preventable.
With proper education and better understanding of the problem, this condition is preventable.
With proper education and awareness, this problem is preventable.
We must put a stop to it now before it's too late.
We must put a stop to it now before it's too late.
Outside.
One way, it was a.
It's almost like before it's too late. Well, it's been too late for many of us, like me.
We
So
must put a stop to it now.
Before-
To
before-
prevent more.
to prevent killing more,
Straighten up a little bit.
I didn't say killing or harming,
I mean, it has, yeah. One of the highest rates of death, I forget what the percentages of death that is uncovered is death because of anorexia or suicide.
We must put a stop to it before more women are harmed.
We must put a stop to this before
We must put a stop to it before more women are harmed.
yeah. We must put a stop to this before more women are harmed.
It affects the health and well-being of our best female athletes.
It affects the health and well-being of our best female athletes. And I would also say some of the greatest female athletes will never be seen because they will never be healthy. They will never stay healthy enough to get to the podium.
Say it.
And I will argue that some of the very best female athletes you will never see because they will never get to the podium. They will never be healthy enough to get to that point.
We know after years of research that when women don't fuel enough to support their training regime, I don't even know what. I forget that. Female athletes who overtrain and underfuel are finding themselves in trouble.
I think one of the things is that unlike a concussion, the effects aren't urgent and they're not visible. And so you can go for the damage doesn't happen till years later, and then it's lifelong, and then it's too late.
Say it again.
Unlike things like concussions, which are immediate and they're urgent and they're visible, the damage that's being done with females in these bone-forming formative years is that it's not often visible, and the real damage isn't done until years later when it's too late. And then the damage you have to live with for the rest of your life.
So can you say that again, but without concussions, because that's not true about concussions.
Okay.
Just say that
Like a lot of injuries or like a lot of health conditions.
I'm gonna say like anything, just say one of the real tragedies is the damage is.
I like that.
Yeah. You don't wanna minimize someone else's problem.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest tragedies is that the consequences of what happens during those formative years where the consequences aren't visible and the long-term damage doesn't really take effect until years later, and by that time it's too late. And often it results in a lifetime of chronic pain and mental issues, and a trap that women can't get out of.
What's amenorrhea?
Amenorrhea is loss of a period due to energy deficit.
And what is energy deficit? Can you say that energy deficit and then explain what energy deficit is? Because does that mean you're tired? What does that mean?
So yeah, amenorrhea is loss of a period because your body is burning so much that it's literally starving to survive. So anything that is secondary to survival doesn't happen. So getting your period isn't essential to survival. So you stop getting your period because your body's using all its energy to fight to stay alive.
How do you stop that?
in order to stop that, you have to have an equal energy, like, inputs versus outputs. And sometimes it's not as simple as saying just eat more. Pounding your body in the way that a distance athlete pounds the body day in, day out, is not something I don't think we were meant to do. And especially when a female is at an age where estrogen to the body is so important, and because the body's using so much energy, they're not getting the estrogen, that they cannot menstruate. They start leaking bone. I don't know how to say it.
Would you mind putting Sands Morning to
Yeah, let's cut it real quick anyway.
Because